use of public service resources. The bill proposes also that statements issue in respect of future tax liabilities, but it is not clear at a practical level how this is to be done. Estimates of future tax liabilities at the level of the individual depend on estimates of future income, which as a matter of routine would not be known to the Revenue Commissioners. In the case of businesses, future tax liabilities depend on future income and future costs, among other things. Such items are not always predictable or stable. Turning to the question of distributing statements, the most obvious and effective mechanism to distribute any proposed statements to individuals is by way of an electronic interface. However, in order to protect taxpayers' confidentiality, any electronic system containing taxpayer information and data must be properly secured and accessible only through secured passwords and other protections. Although Revenue has a number of online systems, they are designed for the declaration and collection of tax. They would require extensive and expensive development to reconfigure for use in the distribution of the data outlined in this proposal. In addition, it is unfortunately the case that not all taxpayers have or indeed want access to Revenue's online facilities. Accordingly, in these cases, Revenue will be obliged to print and then post the data and information to individual taxpayers. The operational costs in this can be very significant. Furthermore, Revenue has found that in the past the distribution of unsolicited information has sometimes surprised many taxpayers and sometimes caused needless concern. This gave rise to substantial increases in phone calls, letters and personal callers to Revenue offices. These often simple information or explanatory inquiries resulted in the diversion of resources. Revenue has been progressively moving towards online and away from paper-based communications. The efficiency gains from these developments cannot be understated, as I understand was referred to during the coverage of the bill's proposals on radio earlier this morning. Aside from the practical measures, costs and difficulties to implement these measures, the core mission of the Revenue Commissioners is the collection of taxes and duties and the implementation of customs controls. It is no function on the decision relating to the allocation or expenditure of government funds arising from taxes received. Accordingly, the provision of details on the government's use and expenditure of taxes is not readily available to the Revenue Commissioners. Any requirement on the Revenue Commissioners to gather, analyse and provide details of how taxes are spent would be adding the burden of non-core functions on an already fully engaged revenue resource. To turn now to the issues of performance enhancement, there has been a number of government initiatives to improve the focus on performance delivery and results. The publication in February of this year of the Book of Estimates marked an important departure from the traditional way of setting out the estimates. Where previously the focus of the estimates was solely on financial and human resource inputs, it now contains an unprecedented volume of performance information, both in terms of what services were provided and the impacts of these services on Irish society. Finally, I note the bill also addresses the issue of public procurement. In Ireland, the scale of procurement activities in supplies and services by public bodies is estimated at 9 billion. This highlights the importance of achieving maximum value for money and operational efficiency in public procurement. And for reasons, public procurement is one of the major projects of key strategic importance under the government's Public Service Reform Plan, published in November 2011. In conclusion, I see a lot of merit in the Deputy's proposals, but there would be logistical difficulties in providing the information that he seeks. I think in general terms, his proposal is a proposal that should be considered further in the Houses of the Oireachtas, and the Government will not oppose the second reading of this bill. Certainly, a better informed public and better informed taxpayers enhance democracy. And I know that certain elements of what the Deputy proposes are implemented in other jurisdictions. At an initial initiative might be that a P60 would contain a website reference where taxpayers could access on a website additional information along the lines that the Deputy refers to, especially to show how their taxes are being spent, and that they then are in a position to assess what value for money they're getting from the payment of their taxes. I've noted the comments made by other deputies. Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan talked about the fact that older generations are not computer competent in many respects and would find it difficult to access information. But if accessibility are due to technology, then it's not possible to retrofit it and to give the same accessibility to people who are not using the technology. You know, it's not possible because there's a technological advance to say we can do the same in a horse and buggy system. When the reason it wasn't done in the first instance was the technology wasn't in place to do it. But in general terms, I'd like to thank Deputy Murphy for a very valuable contribution to the advancement of democracy and to the advancement of transparency and to the advancement, I would think, of the possibility of better compliance by taxpayers if they knew that they were getting value for money on the basis of the information supplied. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Griffin.
Thank you. How much time have I available?
15 minutes.
Okay.
Up to.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that goes. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak here this morning, and I want to welcome this bill wholeheartedly from Deputy Murphy, and I also welcome the general support that the bill has received from across all sides of the House here this morning. And I commend Deputy Murphy for bringing this bill to the House. And I know that he has certainly put an awful lot of work into this bill, and it's something that is important that we have time to discuss here in such detail. I believe that this is a very progressive bill. The bill represents, in my opinion, a new departure in tax transparency in this state. And such a detailed breakdown as given in the example by Deputy Murphy earlier, I think will help ingrain in the national psyche the importance of focus on spending priorities in policy debate. And it will lead, I think, to a better standard of debate prior to elections in this country and between election time. And I think it will also somewhat weaken the impact of often out of context and often disingenuous sound bites in relation to various areas of expenditure. And I think that's important. It will give us more perspective on how the Irish people's taxes is being spent. I think what Deputy Murphy is proposing in his bill represents a proactive effort by the state to inform the citizen. And as a result of this legislation, the state effectively will be going to the citizen with that information and making sure that every citizen knows just how much of their tax money is being spent on various areas. And I think this really is bringing politics back to the people. And I think this is a real step forward and this is real progress. And I certainly support that. I agree with Deputy Doherty, who's left the chamber now, when he says that there are huge issues facing the country. Yes, there are. And we are all here, I think every one of the 166 of us here all want to help address those issues and fix those issues as quickly as possible. But I think what is missed on Deputy Doherty here this morning is the fact that it's initiatives like this bill that actually help. They represent a thinking of outside the box. And I think they will help revolutionise how we actually do politics in this country, how we govern. And I think this will help the change agenda, because it will help us look at politics from a different perspective. And I think it will erode a lot of the populism that we hear in relation to expenditure debates. And I think it will give real concrete facts to the people. That's very, very important. And it's something that we need more of. Just in relation, there were some comments made by Deputy Boyd Barrett in relation to people who are not paying income tax, and I acknowledge that that might be a problem in relation to this matter, and I think it's something that may be easily got around through very simply including with the tax transparency receipt just a general breakdown of how taxes are spent on a national level, which would also include a breakdown of taxes that are raised through measures such as VAT, corporation tax, excise, and a lot of the taxes that people who are not paying income tax are paying on a day-to-day level. And I think that would be important, and it would include everybody. And it's something that could be considered at a later stage, and it would be a generic receipt, so I don't think there will be any huge expenditure involved. And it is important that when we are looking at how we furnish each and every individual concerned here with this information, that expenditure and capping that expenditure is a priority. And I'm sure that a mechanism can be worked out to make this as affordable as possible, yet at the same time making sure that the quality of the information received is top class. And I see the example from the UK, I think that the figure was 26 pence. That's a very, very small price to pay for such very important information, and for something, as I said earlier, that I think will help change the direction of policy discussion in this country. Very, very small price to pay. And in the context of the example that was given in relation to Ms. Duffy, 26p in relation out of €10,000 is very small indeed. Finally, I'd just like to say that in relation to the Irish people's taxes, it's absolutely important that we have full transparency. It's absolutely important that we have full accountability. And can I just say as well, on top of that, we need sensibility and responsibility. And without that, I don't think our national recovery process can continue, because the people need to have absolute faith in how their money is being spent, and they need to have absolute faith that the people who are in charge of spending that money are taking their job responsibly. I believe this government is doing that, and I believe this is yet another step from this government in bringing to the people what we are doing differently, how we're doing business differently. And I think this particular bill, outside of those areas of transparency, accountability, sensibility and responsibility, will bring perspective, and that's very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Griffin. Deputy Kine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to commend Deputy Owen Murphy for bringing this bill to the House, and also to the Minister of Finance in relation to his support and the government support for this bill. The Minister has stated that there is considerable merit in making more information available to the public in relation to sources of exchequer income and expenditure, and I think nobody can disagree or deny that is what we should be about. Obviously, each year we publish a budget, and major changes become known straight away. If there's, the old reliables are voted on that night, changes to tax bands, credits, rates, changes to social welfare rates, reductions in services or changes in state services, efficiencies, cost reductions, etc., become known. And these are, digested, commented on, debated. And after that, I suppose people tend to lose sight of the overall budget. They see tax leaving their pay packets, but except for the diligent who might pursue or peruse the internet for budget breakdowns, the majority don't know where the money goes. Headline figures as shown by Deputy Murphy in the breakdown and his calculations are excellent at immediately focusing attention, for example, on the three main areas of government expenditure: health, education and social protection, and allowing people information on the breakdown within those departments, obviously accessible on the internet and in budgets in quite detail, and providing that directly to people into their hands, so that they can say, well, I'm paying 3,000 or whatever it is on these certain headings, and how that is broken down. I welcome the example that Deputy Murphy has given in relation to, for example, as said, breaking down education into the amount spent on primary, secondary and third level, and similarly for other areas that should be expanded for health, social protection and justice, as he's given examples. I would believe that if this comes to pass and as public interest in the tax statement would grow, that there would be a greater demand for even more information to be provided at that level. And that would be a debate that would I suppose, be ongoing once people started seeing, well, what I'm paying such and such, and I want even more details provided to me directly. So I can see that into the future. There are always greater calls for government transparency, and the title of the bill captures that demand. Government obviously leads the way in publishing their full budget, with Department votes on all items of expenditure, but this bill breaks down expenditure down to a personal level, and that's certainly to be welcomed. There sometimes can be inherent problems with this. Sometimes, it's similar to linking household charges or property tax to services on the ground. Many people, and often it comes up at public meetings, say, well, I'm living in a rural area, what do I get for paying a household charge or property tax? And this is something that I suppose some sectors of the country, the more urban areas, would have more ease in explaining versus some rural areas. It even came up recently at a meeting with myself, and again, someone who hadn't paid his household charge said, why should I pay it, etc., etc., what am I getting in my rural area? And this is, I suppose, an inherent problem with any breakdown or with any justification of why you're paying a local tax, or indeed any tax. Some people will believe that they shouldn't pay any tax, that the only things that a state needs to provide is a police force and the defence of our country. Everything else could be provided privately. Obviously, I don't agree with that, but that would be some people's view. And I'm reminded of an English gentleman in my constituency who was canvassing one time, and he had ran in a general election in the UK, and he used to knock on doors and he says, would you like to speak about education, health, or local roads? And this lady answered the door one day and said that I don't have kids who have no interest in education, I have private health insurance, and I don't want the roads improved because people will only drive faster past my house. So that's on a very local level in terms of how people will say that they have no interest in anything if it doesn't affect them directly, and that they really don't want to pay tax at all. My local parish priest, Father Michael McLaughlin, when he arrived in my village of Cullen a number of years ago, gave over one sermon per year to detailing parish accounts, which marked a significant departure from the previous incumbents. So this was a breath of fresh air. He basically gave a breakdown of what income was coming in to the parish and where it was being spent, and that was certainly welcome. There was a number of accounts, there was statements being provided, and there was a lay committee appointed, and they gave a breakdown as well of where money was being spent. And similarly, I remember when writing for my local magazine, My Column Matters, when then a member of Galway County Council, and in one contribution detailing the county council budget. And this provided a lot of information that many people didn't have, and a lot of people, come into me afterwards and looked for follow-up information. And this was, I suppose, one of the first times, although again this information is available on the internet, but when delivered personally to somebody in a concise manner, broken down, it generates a debate, it generates people's wondering, well, God, I didn't know the county council were spending millions on this, I didn't know that this actually came under the county council level. So providing that information and breaking it down is actually quite interesting. Transparency is the key to any democracy, and sometimes you have to question how far will you go. Farmers' payments, for example, were published a number of years ago online, what they were receiving in direct payments from the EU and from the state, and they were broken down by name and by maybe not by townland, but by parish or village, and it allowed people to go onto the internet to see what their neighbours were earning and taking in under direct payments. Now, this was available for a period of, I'm not sure how long, a year or two. It was eventually challenged actually by Germany, who felt, by German farmers, I think, to the European courts, and it was eventually removed. But it begs the question, because rightly politicians' salaries, whether it be TDs, senators or county councillors, and their allowances and everything is published, and a big splash on national papers. Begs the question, how much other information should be provided in terms of where state salaries are going? For example, should all public servant salaries be published? Should all recipients of social welfare payments be published? That's possibly a step too far, but that's a bigger debate and one possibly worth having, because people sometimes wonder, if you're talking about transparency at all, the question arises, how much detail should you eventually provide? So that's an interesting question, I suppose, for a debate. It's great, as I said, to debate these issues, and I would like to commend Deputy Murphy for producing the bill, and I certainly hope it can be progressed quickly, and certainly by next year that after the budget we would see all people in the country receiving such a statement, I do believe it's right and proper to send out that statement by post, because whilst things are available for those that are computer literate, there are a lot of people out there, still, elderly people who still don't have the competence in terms of the internet. And I think it's right and proper that this would be considered in terms of posting such a statement out to every individual. Again, I'd like to commend Deputy Murphy and wish him well in relation to the progress of this bill.
Thank you, Deputy Kine. Deputy Law.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Before I start, I just want to make a little comment, and it's in regard to a rugby match tomorrow afternoon, and a club mate of mine, Jamie Heaslip, has the very proud distinction of leading the Irish team out, and he's representing the club in Naas. I wish him the very best. It's a proud occasion for himself, his family and his friends, and I wish himself and the Irish team all the best in the match tomorrow.
Yes, I think we'd all
all right. Just on this, and I must say I welcome this bill. I congratulate Deputy Murphy for the time and effort he's put into the bill. I think the idea that we put more and more information, particularly about the public finances and where money is spent, into the public domain is vitally important. Most of my colleagues have spoken on the positive side of this. I'm going to speak about a few reservations that I would have associated with the bill. And one of them, I think, has been sort of mentioned briefly by Deputy Kine here beside me, and that's the fact that in rural areas, particularly, I come across situations when we're dealing with planning permissions and people are coming in looking for advice on it. And particularly they're looking for advice afterwards on the levies that they have to pay with regard to the planning that they have received. And in fairness now, I know in Kildare County Council, I'm not sure about other councils around the county or the country, Kildare give down a breakdown as to where the levies are going to be spent on, whether it's spent on sewerage, and if you have your own sewerage treatment there, you get a forego that payment, and if you have your own water, access to water, you forego the payment on that. But there's also payments with regard to roads and playgrounds and things like that. And people have been coming to me and say, why should I pay when they live in a rural lane and the lane hasn't been looked at for a number of years by local authorities? Why should I pay for a road that's been done, I'm paying for a road, and it's not been done outside my own place? And the question they need, why should I pay this? They also question, well, I'm 5 miles away from the nearest town or 10 miles away from the nearest town where there's a playground. Why should I make a contribution towards a playground that I don't have real access to? And that's the thing that I look at. It's where a person looks at the individual good or the common good. And trying to explain that to some individuals who come to me and question the fact about paying the levies that they have to pay, it beggars the questions that they ask me, why should I pay it? And I say, it's for the common good. It's available to all sorts. So it leads on to the point I'm going to make with regard to when you itemise where you spend the taxpayers' money and you give that to the individual, they will question as to why I should be paying this. Why should I, when I go to a pub in the evening time at night and I see the person who is permanently on social welfare payments, who hasn't made any effort to get any job, why should I make a payment towards him and he's spending out most of the time out, seemingly from 4 o'clock when the pub opens and is there after? Why should I make a payment to that? So my concern is going forward that if all this information is out there for the individual to make a judgment on it, they will question and they will look at a society in which we're trying to pull everyone along together, and we don't like to see a divide in Irish society, that we may see a serious split happening as to those people who are making the payments, who are paying their taxes, who are making the payments to central government, and see where exactly the money has been spent, as to those people who cannot and are not able to and in certain cases not willing to make the payment, and that might only generate and split up Irish society. So I would have a problem with the amount of information we may give out. The information is available there if you want to go and look for it yourself, but if you give it out to individuals, they may use it in a more negative way than what is intended for. The other time I said, and as I've already mentioned with regard to the levies that are being paid by individuals, is that people now look at tax exiles, people who are living outside the country, and the donations they make to certain things. And they might start questioning, well, why should I pay my tax? Why don't I make the equivalent donation to something in my own area? For example, we only see there's a large donation was made to the payment of the Irish soccer manager by an individual who is outside the country, a tax exile. What happens with it if an individual would decide then, well, I want to see my tax money spent better, so I feel that it might be spent better by if I give the money that I'm due to pay, as Deputy Murphy indicated earlier on, a tax bill of 10,000, if I give that 10,000 to, for example, the Jack and Jill Foundation, who would spend it better than if I gave it to the government, who disbursed it to all around the place. So we have to be a sort of thing like that. The other side too as well, and it has been mentioned before by Deputy Coyne, with regard to where the farmers previously, their payments received. And maybe if we look at that and advance that further, do we see then that all government payments that are given out, will they be in the public domain to be examined by all and sundry? So, for example, people on social welfare, people, civil servants, public servants, and all people who receive public money. I must say I very much welcome the section on the procurement. There is a worry out there that small firms are being excluded from public procurement. A lot of us are fighting hard to make sure that small firms, and small, I define a small firm as someone who's employing 10 people or less. Whereas in some cases the Minister might define a small firm as someone with 50 people or less. That small firms are being excluded from public procurement. And Deputy Murphy was interested that the OPW, who is in charge of a major section of public procurement, will be coming before the Jobs Committee, because the Jobs Committee are very strong in seeing as much as possible that small firms are associated with the 9 billion that's been spent out there. All in all, I must say, Deputy Murphy, the bill, I welcome the bill. I like to see some of the amendments when they're coming forward to the committee stage that would protect so much that we don't give. People need the information is available out there anyway, but we don't have to give them the information for a stick to beat ourselves with and to beat other people, sections in Irish society with. I think it's a very well thought out bill, and I wish you the best of luck in the committee stage, and well done again. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lawler. Deputy McGrath.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I say that I want to warmly welcome the publication of the Tax Transparency Bill 2012, and I'd also like to compliment Deputy Owen Murphy for bringing it forward to the House and commend him for it, because I think it's very, very important. It's a very important issue, and it's also very relevant to the debate that's going on in the current economic climate. So I just want to say at the very outset that I will be supporting the legislation, because I think when it deals with issues like transparency and accountability, I think that that's a progressive thing in the political system, and regardless of where it comes from. And I have a very old basic principle as an independent TD. If somebody comes forward an idea, some sensible piece of legislation or some practical solution inside the Dáil, no matter where it comes from, if it's good, if it's sensible, I think people should support it. And I think that's important to say that as well. And regardless of party politics, I'll support this piece of legislation because it's a very relevant one, and I think it's very sensible. Maybe it's time for a new type of politics, and people shouldn't be afraid to say that. That was Matty, actually. I didn't go up for the election. that was the other McGrath. That was Matty McGrath. But and he was speaking on his own behalf. I guarantee you that. But can I go back to the legislation now, Chairman? There. And but just to go back to the whole the issue in relation to the legislation, I just made the point that I think maybe there are times in the House when opportunities should be given to people to vote on issues, and members of parties and members of governments, if they have an issue of conscience or something they want to make a statement about, I think there should be a freedom in there. They do it in other parliaments, and I think we should look at that as well. In relation to the legislation itself, the tax issue is a hugely important issue. And it's the backbone of our economy and how we run the country. And I think the citizens of this state, and I emphasise citizens rather than taxpayers, the citizens of the state need to know exactly what's going on, how their money is being spent, And I think this piece of legislation deals with this. But the first thing we've got to do is we have to deal with the reality as well. First of all, you have to pay your tax, and people have to make a contribution, and people have to be fair and honest in relation to making their payments to the state. And sadly, in this state, there is a history of people not being very compliant on it, and that should end, because that's something that we have to deal with in the broader political sphere itself. In relation to the details of the legislation, you see that the bill makes provision for the issuance to each person paying income tax and other such taxes on earnings of an annual statement detailing tax paid in the most recent tax years, the estimated tax payments to be made in the coming tax year, and a breakdown of the areas of government spending on which the recipient of the staples taxes are to be spent. Then you see the breakdown will be provided in percentage terms as well as in simple monetary terms. And in addition, in the legislation to the annual statement, the bill also provides for publication online of a calculator for estimating the total amount of value-added tax and excise paid on goods and services by an individual. And then the final element in the legislation is a commitment from the government to make the necessary provisions to introduce new minimum threshold for the publication of money spent by a department or agency. And again, these are important things, and these are the key elements in this piece of legislation. So I think they're very positive, I think they're very constructive, and I also think they're very sensible. When you go further down into the details in Part 2, for example, sections 3 and 4 there, this part contains two sections that address the central purpose of the bill, which is to cause the Minister for Finance to publish annually and to issue to each person having paid tax. And Section 3 then contains a sensible provision regarding the publication of the statement. Again, these are very important things, and these are at the heart of the legislation, and these are something. And I emphasise when we're talking about taxes, it's also very important to realise that, for example, a big debate at the moment on excise taxes. And I see we had one of our colleagues in the channel yesterday, Senator John Crown, wanted to ban smoking completely from the Dáil premises, and he wants to implement it. I know it might be very popular with some guys, but there are people in the Dáil that disagree strongly with it. But we're also, there's an issue here in relation to the legislation now. Those of us that have a few cigarettes every now and again, we pay massive tax, lads. You know that? We're paying over €9 for 20 cigarettes, making a massive contribution. And then you guys want to drive us underground or drive us out the door, and you lose tax and you lose revenue to the state. And just look at, talk to Real Ireland. I answered that one yesterday, the Minister Keogh. I answered that one yesterday. But can I go back to the issue of tax, with your permission, Chair, and with the protection of the Chair. Chair, I hope you're going to protect me against all those guys over there.
Oh, you need it back.
10-1, no, it's hard going on here being an independent. But to go back to the issue, you're up against big parties and big resources and big machines. It's very, very difficult, you know. But can I go back to the tax issue? But I mean, Senator Crown and his nanny state brigade, I call them, they want to realise that people have civil liberties that people should be allowed to do. We're all adults going out to do what we do. 30% of the population are paying a massive contribution every time we buy a packet of 20 cigarettes. I'm not saying it's good for your health. I accept all those health arguments. But the point about it is, don't drive us underground and don't lose hundreds of millions in euro of taxes. Because illegal cigarettes and smoking, illegal cigarettes at the moment, is destroying the retail industry. Talk to the shopkeepers. I've had a load of small business into my office there recently. They're losing thousands of euro every year because of the huge amount of smuggling of cigarettes that's going on in the community. So I'm making the point on the tax issue. I'm not making the point on the health issue. But I think it's time for Senator Crown to get a life too and give some of us a bit of a break. We don't want to live in any state. Let's respect all different views. Now, to go back to the legislation again, in Part 4 there are Sections 7 to 9. This part contains 3 sections and addresses the third purpose of the bill, which is to cause the government to make the necessary provisions so that every purchase order by a government department or agency of more than €5,000 must be published online with exceptions. And again, I think the Part 4 there is a very good one, and a number of my colleagues have mentioned as well, particularly in relation to small businesses. And I don't think we should be apologising to people if we make a special effort to try and give work to small businesses. And I take the point there, I think it was Deputy Lawler said, about small business. I mean, small business to me is anybody that employs 3 or 4 or 5 people. I don't go along with this business. You have to have 50 or 100 people small business. There's lots of people in this state that employ 3 to 5 people, and we should be out there helping them. And I think this part 4 of this legislation is an attempt as well to put them on the radar and put them in the picture. So, Carla, I just want to say I warmly welcome the legislation. I'd be glad to give Minister Keogh any details of the Leaders' Allowance anytime he wants. If he has time for research, he can look up the website. You'll see all the details on it. You'll see accountability, transparency, opency. It's all there. You name it. So what I'm saying is, in the overall thing, I want to wind up now, Carlow, and I just want to say I want to commend once again Deputy Owen Murphy for the legislation, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy McGrath. Deputy Deering.
Thank you, Carlow. Like previous speakers, I'm delighted to get the opportunity to speak on this particular bill here today. I'd like to compliment my colleague, Deputy Murphy, also for introducing this bill. I think it's a very, very forward-thinking bill. I think it's ironic that even though there's very few across the way here at the moment, the new Friday sittings give an ideal opportunity for people like ourselves here in the government benches to introduce such very important legislation. I think it's a point that should not be missed on this particular occasion today. The contents of the bill have been outlined earlier on by previous speakers. I suppose the main point I would see in this bill, even though we're not bringing in more taxes to the country, will introduce a lot more transparency, which is important, and it will give people a sense of knowing where their money goes. I think it's very, very important that we know exactly how much money we pay, whether it be towards education, national or secondary level, or third level, whether it be towards agriculture or towards health in this day and age. Nowadays, in the Ireland of the 21st century, people are more knowledgeable and more inquisitive as to where our money goes. I think it's important that we give as much information as possible in that regard. I think this was quite evident earlier in the year with the introduction of the €100 household charge, where people were being misinformed by members of the opposition as regards what the money was for. I think as time went on and as people were educated as regards this is for essential services in our community, be it filling potholes, be it the town parks, be it museums, be it the swimming pools or whatever. They are very essential services in our community, and that's what the money goes towards. It's important that we inform the people as much as possible that the money that we pay in taxes goes towards essential services that need to be paid, and that without those services we will not have a society that's important. I also think it's important that we have a debate about these particular issues. You know, some people believe that everything is for nothing, but once those particular facts and figures are put on the table, it is more important, and transparency is very important. I'll also welcome the part of the bill which outlines the purchase orders. I think we've seen over the years whereby substantial money has been wasted in society. That needs to be addressed in the future, and I welcome that particular section of the bill. One of the main points I think in this bill, and I think it's been mentioned by previous speakers positively and negatively, is regards whether the information should be online or in the post. I personally believe, even though we are going very high-tech now at the moment in this day and age, and more people have access to the internet, I think it's essential that a letter would be delivered to somebody's door. There's nothing more important than when the letter with the harp arrives, it is taken account of. It's not thrown in the bin. It's not torn up and burnt or whatever else. People will take account of that, or will remember what it's for, and most likely will put it up with their file for the next year, and we'll be able to compare like with like. So I think it's very important that, even though there is substantial cost involved, as the Minister outlined earlier on, I think that in some way, I think the cost that are involved would supplement itself in time, and it would be money well spent. Now, obviously, there is a lot more work to be done in this particular bill, which I would welcome and look forward to contributing as we move on through it. But I think the important part is the more transparency we bring into the system, the more lack of resistance we have to paying what our due regards are. It's important that we bring the people with us in society at the moment. We're in difficult times, we're tired of hearing, I suppose, but the more information that we supply to the people, the more knowledgeable they will become, and in my opinion, the more they will be prepared to buy into what it is, getting this country back up and running again. So to conclude, I'd like to welcome the bill here today, compliment Deputy Murphy for the time, energy and work that he's put into the bill. I'd also like to compliment the Minister for his positive sentiments towards the bill, and hopefully by this time next year we can see this bill being more abuse to society in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Deering. Deputy O'Donnell.
First of all, I'd like to welcome the opportunity to speak in the legislation and acknowledge, I suppose, the provision of Friday sittings by the Government Chief Whip in respect to this. I know some people might have been critical of the Government's initiative at the outset in relation to how government backbenchers were provided time for and how they were engaged with by the Government Chief Whip, but I think he has shown here today a level of engagement and something that I would welcome. Just before I get into the crux of the bill, I think Deputy Pearse Doherty, in his usual colourful and irrelevant fashion, went on about transparency, and Deputy Doherty might do well to actually look at the fact that between the years 2001 and 2010, while he was very critical of the Taoiseach using the state services to go to EU meetings, he omitted to tell the House that between the years 2001 and 2010, £4,232,868 £868 were paid to Deputy Adams, Mr Pat Doherty, Miss Michelle Gildernew, Mr Martin McGuinness and Mr Conor Murphy for their non-attendance at the British Parliament in Westminster. So while Deputy O'Doherty would come in and be all things all people about, you know, we're great in Sinn Féin and, you know, we love to wrap the cloak of austerity around ourselves, I think they want to be truthful with the people, that they are drawing massive sums of money from Her Majesty's Treasury in London. They're taking the Queen's shilling with absolutely no problem for their non-attendance in a parliament that they have a huge ideological problem with. And I think that in fairness to this House, they would do well in future when they come in and start pontificating about the cost of politics in this state, they would do well to tell the whole truth. And in relation to Deputy McGrath, who gave another very politically opportunistic contribution here this morning, again, all things to all people. I have to say that it was absolutely the most cynical display of political opportunism that I have seen in the recent past yesterday, where he and a few of his colleagues decided to go out and to try and, I suppose, throw an unnecessary spanner into the mix of what is a hugely important issue tomorrow, namely the children's referendum. And I think what was worse was the contribution that was made on the 6-1 News by another member of that group in respect of the children's referendum, where he personalised an attack on the Count Corla, which I felt was totally unnecessary. Now, just in relation to the bill that's before the House, Cairlock, and I thank you for your facilitation. I would have a concern in relation to some aspects of the bill. While I welcome it, I would have a concern, and I would share the concern with Deputy Michael McGrath, which is in relation to the costs associated with the actual getting the information out there. And I would worry that for some elements of it, that we might run into the risk of breaking a kind of a social cohesion amongst the people who don't pay tax. And I think it's very important for people who don't pay tax, for whatever reason, through inability to work, through lack of work, through retirement, through the fact that they are people who've come to the state from another country or whatever, that those people don't feel outside the mix here. And there is a danger, and I would caution it, that, you know, that we might exclude those people from this. I think as well, in relation, there are some very good aspects in relation to it. I think that the idea of the VAT calculator is a very good idea, where it will be available online. But I would just, I suppose, ask the question, why is the Public Accounts Committee not doing more of this kind of work, to be honest about it, and performing this sort of function in relation to getting that level of information out to the taxpayer and out to the consumer? And I think particularly in relation, for instance, in the recent past, that Irish aid programme, where money that was attributed by the Irish taxpayer was accounted for by the Ugandan Public Accounts Committee system, but it wasn't identified here in Ireland, over €4 million worth. And I would just wonder, are our internal auditing and our internal accounting systems that are in place here in Ireland for the expenditure of public money after the fact, are they strong enough? And I think that's probably the tenet of where the bill comes from. I know that the UK Chancellor of the Exchequer published a piece of legislation last March, which was pretty similar to this in relation to our published proposals in relation to this last March, and I think they brought cross-party support in the UK. So I suppose there is a move towards this. But I think that there's probably more dialogue needed at committee stage. And I think that the role of the Public Accounts Committee here is vital in terms of looking to see exactly where it is that government departments are actually spending their money, and that this floor and that the chamber of the Dáil gets a greater level of engagement with ministers in relation to line-by-line expenditure. But in general, I welcome the spirit of it. I think that it shows as well, I think, that there is a willingness on behalf of the government to facilitate government backbenchers who want to bring forward pieces of legislation. But I would, I suppose, just take what the Minister for Finance said, that you have to be cautious as well, that it's not going to add another unnecessary layer of bureaucracy and another unnecessary layer of cost. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a cost-saving exercise, so we want to be careful from that point of view. But I would like to welcome the bill, and I suppose look forward to the committee stage. So, Gormagat Ceann Comhairle.
Deputy Harris, could I just point out before you speak, Deputy, we've roughly 45 minutes left because we have to call the Minister at 1 o'clock and then Deputy Murphy at 15:15. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 speakers, including yourself. So be conscious of the fact that we're trying to get everybody in. All right?
Sure. I'll be very brief, Ceann Comhairle, and I don't know if at the outset I can ask for your forbearance for less than a minute on an issue that arose that Deputy O'Donovan just raised in his contribution before your arrival in the chamber, but this is the last opportunity that I have to raise it before the Dáil adjourns for the week, which were comments made by another member of this House last night, Deputy Mattie McGrath, on the national broadcaster in relation to the impartiality of you as Ceann Comhairle, and I think it was a scurrilous comment, and I'm hoping that you as the Chair could possibly advise of what action can be taken in that regard. I would draw your attention to those remarks, which I think were both opportunistic, cynical, and obviously completely inaccurate, and I just want to place that on the record of this House. I'd like to thank Deputy Owen Murphy for tabling this bill. I'd like to commend him for the significant amount of work that he has put into it. I think at the very nub of this bill is the desire of the Irish taxpayer to know where their money is going. And I think that's an issue that we all, as public representatives on all sides of this House, and indeed at a local level as well, our councillors right around this country, one of the questions people constantly want to know is when they get their pay slip at the end of the week or fortnightly or monthly, and they see the massive deductions in various taxations and charges and levies, where exactly is that money going? And I heard Deputy Murphy in Morning Ireland this morning with a tax expert, and whilst the tax expert lauded the purpose of the bill and the idea behind the bill, I thought that the tax expert was slightly preoccupied with the issue of compliance, because whilst obviously I think this bill does assist with compliance, I think the overarching aim of this bill goes well above and beyond the issue of encouraging people to pay their taxes, but rather actually enabling people to have the information that they should be entitled to in order to participate in an active and participatory democracy in terms of where their actual taxes go. This bill is at its very nub about transparency. It's about debate. It's about, as a society, saying what value we attach to paying for certain public services, and it's about then informing the public the level of value, economic value, that their representatives of their government have also attached to those services. And crucially, I think it's an end to auction politics. I've said in this House before that it seems to be the key to electoral success in Ireland that Party X would say, vote for us and we'll raise the children's allowance by 5. Party Y would say, oh no, we'll raise it by 650, and this would go on and on and on, and whoever the highest bidder was seemed to win the office of Taoiseach. We saw where that got us, and we saw the quality of individual that got us in the office of Taoiseach. So that auction politics is now over. And it has to be over, and it has to be over for a variety of reasons, including our membership of the Euro, the Stability Treaty, the mess that we're in, learning lessons from the past, and in order to ensure that never again do we see a collapse in terms of employment number, tax revenue, and property prices, as we have over the last number of years. But I think the issue in relation to when this House, or when the media, or when talking heads discuss the economy, taxes, budgets, we're no longer talking in millions, which mean very little to most people. We're now talking in billions. And what this bill attempts to do, and I commend it for that, and I think the Minister for Finance has acknowledged this, is it intends to bring it back to the basic level. What does this mean for my family? What does this mean for my household? What does this mean for the disposable income that I have left to cater for my children or my wife or my husband at the end of the day? And that's what this bill is attempting to do. It's about your family. And I think there's really good work within this bill, and I really hope that at committee stage that it can be further fleshed out. I would acknowledge the progress that government has made in relation to things like the medium-term expenditure framework that the Minister alluded to earlier. And there are just 2 points I'd make. One, in relation to the introduction of the property tax. When we talk about tax transparency, it is going to be really important that there's a good level of understanding as to what a property tax or currently the household charge is actually going to. I've had so many people think that it's related to management fees or to pay for the lights in your housing estate. We need to make sure that if we are going to be having a form of local taxation, that the people understand what that local taxation is. And I think Minister Hogan's suggestion that there'd be an ability under the new local government reforms to modify and to ring fence the property tax in time, I think is a very healthy development for democracy and for transparency. And the second point I would make, and I know Deputy Murphy would also witness these frustrations as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, when we come to talk about transparency, Minister, I'm all in favour of the contents of this bill. But after what we actually saw in the Public Accounts Committee yesterday with the HSE was nothing short of disgraceful. I mean, is it any wonder, regardless of who the Minister of the day or who the government of the day is, that the HSE cannot live within budget? I asked a number of simple questions. What is the cost of absenteeism? What is the cost of sick leave? What is the cost of overtime for nurses? What is the cost of overtime for doctors? How many on-call payments are paid to consultants? And you'd swear I'd ask them to solve world hunger by the end of the day. It was absolutely atrocious. I was met with a wall of silence, and it wasn't silence out of maliciousness or a lack of cooperation. It was silence because the data didn't exist. So yes, we need to be more transparent. Yes, we need to support this bill. We need to go to committee stage, but we also need to instruct our accounting officers, particularly in agencies like the HSE, that they need to up their game and up it pretty rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Hannigan.
Corla. And can I start off by complimenting Deputy O'Murphy on publishing this bill and bringing it forward today. I think there are some very good points within the bill. I particularly like the issue of ensuring that we see greater transparency in how our tax euro is spent. At the moment, there is a concern out there, often expressed by our constituents, that just the money they pay in taxes goes into a black hole, and it's unclear to them exactly where their money is being spent, how it's being spent, whether it's being effectively spent. So I think that anything that helps to improve transparency in the tax system has to be welcomed by everybody in this House. I do have some comments on the bill. They won't take long, and I'm expressing them in the hope that they will add to the debate. They're meant to be helpful. The first is in relation to whether or not we would send this statement to people's house by post, or whether or not it would be just electronic. I think that the phrase used by the people from the South East is it would be on the internet. Well, my personal preference is that it should be on the internet, and I'll tell you why. I think, like the Minister said, we don't want to be seen as increasing costs for the state at a time when we all know that we're finding it difficult to pay our bills. So I think that the system that we should consider is something voluntary, something whereby if you want to find out where your money is going, you put in your PPS number and you put in some sort of security password onto the internet and use that to get a statement of exactly where your money is going. I think it would be environmentally more friendly, and I do think, as the Minister said, it would be much more cost effective. So that might be something that might be worth taking on board. The second point I'd make is in relation to the extending the system to local authorities. Many speakers earlier talked about the need to ensure that there was transparency, not just at a national level, but at a local level too. And it's something that comes up again and again on doors. People are saying, why am I spending this money? Is my property tax going to, is it going to my management fee? Is it going to cut my grass in my estate because I do that myself? People have no idea where the local authorities are spending their money. I'd like to see this bill, the remit of the bill, extended to local authorities. I lived for a while in the UK, and while there I paid the council tax, and I would say, Ceann Comhairle, that the council tax there was of the order of £800–900 per annum, nothing like the €100 a year we're asking for here, similar levels to what Sinn Féin have brought in the north of Ireland. But each council does produce a booklet every year for every payee, and in that booklet it tells you exactly where the money goes. It goes on, this is the amount we pay on playgrounds, this is the amount we pay on fire engines, etc., etc., etc. So people are very, very clear that for their money they're getting that. I think a similar system here would be very useful. I think if it was available online, people could go in to Meath County Council, or they could go into the Dublin City Council, check exactly where their money was going, and I think that would be very helpful. So I do think that this is a very worthwhile piece of legislation. I'm not sure whether or not all of it should be implemented, but I do think it's certainly succeeded in generating a debate. I note the Minister is here in the chair, and I'm hoping that he will take on board many of the points raised today. So once again, thank you very much for your time and for producing this legislation.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Hayden.
Ceann Comhairle, I too would like to just acknowledge the work of Deputy Murphy in relation to this, and of the role of the Chief Whip and of the Minister in allowing us to discuss this here today in what I feel is a very healthy discussion to have, and the whole forum of the Friday sittings, I think definitely is a very healthy thing for us in the backbenches to be able to bring forward items like this. The overriding point about this is transparency, and I think that very much has to be welcomed. Wherever we can get more information out. I am mindful as well, I suppose, from just looking at possible negatives of this, that people can use statistics and lies and twist them to whatever way they want. And this week I had a constituent who rang me raising grave concerns about not wanting to pay the household charge, and pointed out the fact that they had paid a levy to the local authority a couple of years ago, and a portion of which had been broken down, the 15,000 that they had paid for their levies, and a couple of thousand of this had been for recreation. And this person didn't have a playground in their front garden and didn't feel then they had to pay for anything else. I did have to point out that the local authority swimming pool just up the way in Naas had cost €1 million, which that levy money had gone towards. But people can twist this in their own ways, and but I do think, and Deputy Hannigan has touched on it there, that being able to link people closer to the money that's spent and how it impacts on their lives. I think we're all a little bit self-centered and selfish at times, so we like to see, well, what are we getting for our taxpayers' money? And I think that's where the benefit is in this, and it does touch in on Minister Hogan's reform of local government that has been recently announced. That I really welcome and look forward to the down the line, hopefully, where we'll have a situation where a good proportion of the property tax that is raised locally is spent locally. I do believe it will lead to greater accountability. It will probably, I've warned some of my local councillors, it will probably put them under more pressure because they'll be more accountable now. And where local authorities are seen to be wasting money, people will rightly hammer them for it because they'll say, that's my money. At present, I don't think, with how the funding structure has gone since the abolition of rates, I don't think that's the case at present. I think you have people, the local authorities have a handout for the central government fund to a large extent, which is their large source of funding. Locals just see that as money just comes down from Dublin, and they don't really feel necessarily that that's our taxpayers' money or where that link is. And I think at the nub of what Deputy Murphy has proposed in this bill is about making those linkages and seeing it's not necessarily just about compliance, as Deputy Harris has said. It's about an overall pointing out that where this cake all comes from. And that leads me on then to I suppose an area of our economy at present that is that during the recession has probably grown a little bit, and that is the black market. And I recently had a neighbour of mine who told me she wanted to do a little bit of work on her house, and each of the different tradesmen that came to do it all asked for a bit of cash in hand, and she wanted to be able to do it straight, but she was finding it difficulty to get somebody who would do it all through the books. And anecdotally, we do hear stories like that this is a difficulty, and I can understand. Obviously, you can understand why people want to get the cheapest price and do it, but that link with what the state is then losing out by the growth in the black market, to make it almost as socially unacceptable, that it would be a real challenge for us as a government to get to a point where it's socially unacceptable for people to say, oh look, we'll do that cash in hand, because the person might turn around and say, well hold on, our services are going to lose out because of this. And I think this comes down to then people will always make excuses as to why they shouldn't or don't want to pay tax. But if you think about it, if you ask the majority of people who in some way, shape or form are maybe having a bit of tax avoidance, and you ask them, well, why aren't you paying that? They'll say, oh, well, that money's only going to bail out the bondholders or pay for the banks, and I'm not paying that money, it's grand. They'll never mention that some of that proportion of that money goes to pay for SNAs in schools, goes to pay for the building of new schools and buildings, goes to pay for our Garda resources, for funding our healthcare system. And that's the linkages we have to make. And I think, again, the spirit of this bill is very much about being able to get that linkage there and saying that the money that you contribute and what you hate to see going out of your pay packet every week is actually going to something, and it does impact on your life and impact on the lives of those around you, whether it be your elderly relatives who are old age pensioners and who also use some services of the state, or whatever the case may be, that there is that feed in there. Coupled with that as well, I think what drives people really mad when they're paying their taxes is if they feel there's not value for money. And I think there's been lots and lots of examples in recent times as to where the taxpayer has not got good value for money. I do think, back to the point about the reform of local government, where that money is collected locally and brought in, I think you will have a greater accountability on the council officials, that they have to be seen to deliver greater value for money. Also, state departments. We cannot have situations in the future where mistakes with state departments, like the e-voting machines, and that cost 50 million. That drives people absolutely batty, and to see such waste. And that's when you have large amounts of money that people don't feel a sense of ownership of, and that don't feel, well, don't